Well, hello everyone. I am out loosening the legs off after another sportive at the weekend, and I'm just on the turbo trainer because it's pouring a rain outside. And I thought I would do a wee live chat um, because a lot of the newbies, the newcomers to road cycling, um, see that I've done a sportive or other people have done a sportive, and to be honest, their question usually is, what is a sportive? So it's probably good that I try and explain what a sportive is, given that I do a few of them and I actually organise and run one as part of a group of people on my own too. So basically, a sportive is an organised cycle with a pre-designated route that is non-competitive. Generally, they are signposted and usually form an event. They are not competitive at all, or they're not meant to be, and a lot of them are set up more as a challenge or something to help tourism, which is quite often what is happening. My sportive we set up in my town of Darvel to help promote tourism in the area and promote cycling in the area, because we want more people to be visiting it. So generally a sportive has a number of purposes behind it. Sometimes it's backed by a charity, and the charity are putting it on as a challenge, and people can use the event and the cycle to raise money. Like I said, some people are doing it for tourist reasons, and some people just like cycling. You get different types of sportive. You get sportives that are on the road, that is the classic sportive. In Britain, they tend to be on the road, and in the last few years, started to get lots of gravel sportives. Famous ones would include the Dirty Reaver in Kielder Forest, which takes in 200 kilometres of riding through Kielder Forest in Northumberland, and they've become quite popular. Some of them are closed roads sportives, and maybe if we talk about the cost that's involved in the future, that might be something else that changes what a sportive can be. Now, how is it different from a club ride or a race? Well, essentially a club ride, for a start, is organised within your club, and it has your club members there and maybe some other people to that have been invited along. It's generally, a club ride isn't signposted, and quite often the ride is ad hoc. A race will be signposted and have marshals on it, but it essentially is a race where there is a lot of competitiveness, and that brings with it extra risk, especially in road racing, because you can be in a pack or a bunch. So what a sportive does is it takes elements of road races or gravel races, the route, the signposting, the marshalling, but it takes away the competitive side, and It makes it a wee bit more fun. Now, having done both a a race and a sportive, a race your head tends to be down and you're focusing solely on the race. Can't really enjoy it because you're breathing out your rear end. Your head's down, you're in a pack of cyclists. It involves a huge amount of concentration, following wheels in front, etc. So what a sportive does is it takes that all out. So you can quite literally sit up a bit and take in the scenery round about you and enjoy it without that competitive element. You can actually go out and enjoy your cycle. Also tends to be in races that you have to fuel yourself, food and drink, because it's a race and you're either as part of a team or an individual. Whereas a sportive takes that worry out and usually has food stops, etc., that you can stop and help yourself. And the food stops in sportives range greatly. The Moray sportive that I was in the other week there had filled rolls and pies and all manner of real food. Some sportives get sponsorship. For instance, the Fred Whitten in the Lake District is sponsored by my friends Kindle Mint Co, and they stock up with all the gels and stuff that they have. Depends how serious the sportive is. So that's another way it's different from a race, that you kind of don't have to worry too much about yourself, although it's good to carry your own stuff. Races tend to have marshals that are following the cyclists round about in cars, and team cars following them, and you don't have that in a sportive. Depending on the pricing of the sportive and how big an event it is, you may have motorbike outriders. Depends how much the sportive can afford, but you're not going to have as heavy traffic as you would in a race because you've got race cars carrying spare bikes, etc. You'll have seen the Tour de France. Your usual amateur road race doesn't have that, but it's that kind of idea. Now, some people do ask, are sportives competitive? Well, strictly, no. And I always remind the people doing my sportive at the beginning that it's not a race and to enjoy your day out. However, at every sportive I've ever been at or in, there are people take it seriously and competitively, and they will go for trying to be very first over the line. I tend to let these people just go ahead and do their thing because that's what they want to do, and usually if I enter a sportive as opposed to a race, I'm there to enjoy my day. So there are people who treat it competitively. Now, I don't know if you would call this competitive or not, but and I understand it, but some people enter a sportive with the goal of achieving a time over a set distance, and that's great. So they're almost competitive, but only with themselves. And again, sometimes you just let them go. But I've done that myself. There is a sportive called the Tap Loch Ness. It starts and finishes in Inverness. And the nature of that route, a lot of people go for a good time in that. It's around about 100 kilometres. So people kind of want to test themselves on their best 100k. And I think I actually got my best 100k on that ride. So that's pretty normal for people to do it like that. But strictly, no, they are not competitive. There's a few reasons for that, because a lot of the time they're quite busy, and you might be the first person finished at the end or the beginning of the day in the sportive. However, in no way, shape or form does that make you fastest, because quite often, especially in the really large sportives, you'll find they have staggered the start. So although you might be the first person over the line, somebody who started an hour after you may finish it later but quicker. So to be honest, it's really hard to tell. Also, there are lots of people of various abilities. You'll get people with panniers on, people in tandems, all sorts. And sometimes there's not really a race if it's just a huge mixed ability. You're also in with different age groups, and male and female are riding together. So there's no point in it being competitive. But there's nothing wrong with being competitive yourself. Personal competition with yourself is fine. Now you get sportives can be various lengths. There is a tendency to make them really difficult and long. 100 miles for instance. And that's fine, that's great. Because tackling 100 miles, especially if you've never done it before, is a huge achievement. And doing it with other people can sometimes inspire you to get your 100 miles done. Now, the example I would give is, I'm not a runner, however, if I go to a park run, I feel inspired to go a wee bit faster and finish a wee bit quicker because there's other people there. And first time cyclists, or people doing a 100 miler for the first time, for instance, feel that event because they've paid for it, because other people are there. It gives them that wee bit of self competition, which is fine. Now, the suitability of a sportive for beginners. If you've never done a sportive, there are questions and things you need to look at. So, how much time have you got before the event you've signed up for? Especially if it's got a lot of miles in it. Upwards of 80 miles is difficult. The cyclist century, they say, is roughly the equivalent of running a marathon, although I know I'd rather do. But yeah, give yourself lots of time to prepare and build up to a distance if it's not something you've done before. And what I would add in as well, most sportives will give you a distance either in kilometres or miles, but they'll also give you roughly the kind of elevation you'll do. And sometimes that can be a better guide to how difficult a sportive would be than the distance. The Murray sportive I did a few weeks ago, and you can check out the video, although it was in the North East Highlands, didn't have a huge amount of climbing in it. So that sportive would be perfect if you wanted to tackle your first 100 or 100 miler, 161 kilometres if we're being pedantic or European. So yeah, that would be a good one. Whereas the Fred Whitten in the Lake District is not just the hardest sportive I've done, it's one of the hardest rides I've done, because the elevation on that one, as well as being 110 miles, the elevation is over 4,000 metres. So a tough day out. So if you were going to enter that one, it's not something to be done as a beginner. I've been cycling for 18 years before I did the Fred Whitten, so just think about it. Now, a lot of sportives as well, and again, depending on what resources they have, or how they're set up for on the roads, will have options, distance options. Now, I mentioned the Dirty Reaver earlier, so if gravel's your thing, the Dirty Reaver is a good one to look at. It's famous for being a 200 kilometre off-road gravel sportive. However, it does have shorter options. It has a 130km option, 80 miles. Still no mean feat. And it also has a 60km option, which is maybe more achievable if you're either new to gravel or new to cycling. So check out a Sportive if you're a beginner and see what you think you might be capable of and judge the time you have to train before you get there. Now, also, if you are a beginner and you've only done a road bike, don't go and enter a gravel Sportive. Just have a think about it. Maybe have done a few bits in gravel first. Likewise, if gravel's all you've done, going into a road Sportive where you could be with thousands of other people riding closely together, something maybe think about. Now, why do people enjoy them? Well, as I said, there are people enjoy them because of the competitive element. Personally, I'll tell you why I enjoy a Sportive. There are things I don't like about a Sportive, but here's what I do. If I'm somewhere new that I've never been before, and yes, we can all have a GPX route, but it's good to know when you're in a Sportive, you're not going to have to worry about toilets, and you're not going to have to worry about where's there a fuel stop, because usually they're provided. So it gives you a bit of peace of mind. As well are trying to show off the local area. So, if you go in a Sportive, one of the things to enjoy about them is the scenery. Take your time and enjoy it and take it in. My Sportive Dervelo in Ayrshire, which happens in May-June time next year, it's May 29th if you want to keep an eye out for it. I designed the route specifically around a few things. Quiet roads, good quality roads, and most of all, fantastic scenery that you can take in. And also, like I mentioned earlier, there's a kind of camaraderie in a Sportive. It is nice, even if you are the lone biker, it is good to get out and cycle along with other people. Now, the amount of times I've been in a Sportive, whether it be a gravel one, especially in the longer ones, you start chatting to people and get to know them and eventually follow them on Strava or Instagram or whatever. It's really quite nice. Which you wouldn't get in a race. In a race you've not got time to chatting away. But I enjoy that about it. I find now if I go to a Sportive, people sometimes come up to me and say, "Oh, you're the lone biker," and they'll chat away and I get chatting to them and we'll end up with a couple of follows, which is quite nice. So yeah, there is a good bit, it's a good social aspect to it. And you do, even though it's not a race and it's not competitive, you do feel as if you've achieved something when you get to the end of a Sportive. Especially if you've met a distance goal or something like that. Now, choosing the right Sportive. Well, that's a difficult one. Distance and elevation, again, look at the distance and elevation. There are some doozies of 50 milers out there. You might think, 50 miles, 50k, easy. But not so much so, because you see the elevation. So I would say look at both. Distance first. It's 100 miles is 100 miles. There is no such thing as an easy 100 miles. But if it's your first 100 miler, have a look at the elevation. I would also say road or gravel. Nowadays, a lot of people like the quiet and they are going and riding gravel before they've ever ridden on the road because they are liking being away from the traffic. So if that's something you're used to, look for gravel Sportives first and have a shot at them. There are lots of good gravel Sportives out there, the Dirty Weaver I mentioned. If you look up Glorious Gravel, they have a series throughout Britain across the whole year. I think they've got ones across Europe as well, but you can usually find one in your area. They tend to be more expensive, simply because they've got to get out in the wild and quite often get permission and pay for ownership of land, etc. So terrain and route is quite important. I would always check as well what they are providing for the money, because if it is self-supported and it is a gravel and you're away out in the middle of nowhere, you maybe want to give it a miss until you're more experienced. Now price is a biggie, because the price of a sportive can be extremely high. My sportive, we tried to keep at quite a low cost. This year was the most expensive it's ever been, and that was £20. And that is quite cheap as far as things go. But what you got for your money was a signposted route, the GPX sent out to you so you could follow the route on your computer. We had one food stop. Our route was 90 kilometres, so just shy of 60 miles. And you get a medal at the end. And I would say that was quite good value for money. Some sportives now can fit anything between £75 to £100 just for entry. And I'm trying to think, I think the Tap Loch Ness is round about that. The Dirty Reaver might be round about that cost. The Tap Loch Ness and the Tap Caledonia in Pitlochry, they are quite expensive. £75, £80, and even might be even more than that. But they are what we call a closed road sportive, which basically means they have paid for closure of the road, and so that is why it's very expensive. Another thing to consider with cost, it can keep your cost down, can also make it more expensive, is charity fundraisers. Now a lot of sportives partner up with various charities. The Tap Caledonia partners up with Marie Curie. And Marie Curie, as far as I'm aware, don't get any direct money from your entry fee. However, you can sign up to a pledge place and say they ask you to raise £300-400 for your place. You don't pay the entry fee, but you have to make that pledge. So if you don't get enough donations, say you only get £50, you're going to have to pay the other £250 for the pledge place. However, you might have a good network and people in your work in a big office or something, they're donating a couple of pounds each. It gets you in, and it is quite nice to donate to charity. I entered the Chris Hoy Sportive, the Tour de Four, which is in a couple of weeks, and subscribe so you can see about that. It was around about £60 to enter. They ask if you can raise money for charity. You don't have to, because some of their entrance fee it does go to the charity. However, I've got a group with my group Loudon Road Club. We are going to be raising money for the charity involved, Prostate Cancer UK. And we're doing that as a group. Right, feed stations and support. A lot of support, a lot of events now actually go heavy in the adventure thing. Audax is not a sportive, but a lot of places are becoming like Audax, where you are self-supported. You've got a route and a GPX to use, but it's not signposted, and you're self-supporting. So I would think about that. That's something for experienced cycles only. Always read the feed stations and see whenabouts they are. If you're doing a ride that's 100k and they're saying feed station every 25k, so you get one at 25, 50, 75. If you know 25 is good before you need a stop, perfect. If it's got less than that, then don't just think about training for that bigger distance. Training for the length of time between stops at the feed stations. And actually think about the feed stations as well. What are you getting for your money? Because I can go back to the entrance fee. If it's a big entrance fee, you'd be expecting something for your entry price. Wee word on feed stations. Don't ever think that we are going to have a lovely smorgasbord of food that you're going to love. Fill your pockets with the stuff you like. You know there's nothing worse if you're on a big day out. If you get to the feed station, you're knackered, you're hungry, and it's stuff you just don't like. I know I've done a race a couple of times, well not a race, the race, the Gralach, which is also a sportive the next day, and I'm glad I had my Kendall Mintco stuff, because the other competitors' brand that they were using as sponsored their stuff, just did not like it at all. So I had my pockets filled with my own stuff. Think about route marking as well. I, as an organiser of a sportive, like to have two things for sure. I like my course signposted. Not everybody has a fancy computer that can detail a route in front of you, so it's got to be well signposted, which mine's is. But also the GPX route, because as I've experienced the first year I run my Sportive Dervelo, in the very first couple of miles, some youthful scallywags or somebody had removed one of the signs and made one of the other signs go in another direction. But because everybody had a GPX, they followed the route I'd given them, which I told them to do no matter what. So think about the route marking for the station. Sometimes don't hassle somebody for GPX. Most sportives, and I'm saying this from experience, will actually have a GPX that they'll give out close to the event. They don't always want to give it out because basically they're trying to make their money back and get as many people to turn up to their sportive. And if they just have the GPX publicly, people will take it and go and do it themselves. So don't worry. If it comes to the week of the event, ask the organiser if there's going to be a GPX, but 6 months before it, don't worry about asking them, they'll get it out to you. But most of all, think about your ability. Don't bite off more than you can chew, or you're not going to enjoy it. Pick an event. If you're going to do a big event, 100 miler or something like the Dirty Reaver, enter it well in advance. Now the advantage with most sportives nowadays is they sell the entries well in advance, 8 to 9 months in advance sometimes. So get your entry in early, and that gives you time to prepare, so you're going to enjoy it in the day. If it is close at hand, just look at the distance and the elevation and think, does that suit my ability right now? So if the event's in 2 weeks, if you've never done 100 miles or anything close, you're not going to get to 100 miles in 2 weeks. It's just not going to happen. But if it's a 25 mile sportive or a go ride or even 50k, that's something you might manage. And I don't know if any of you out there have a favourite sportive that you've done as a first or just in general. But maybe you can let me know in the comments on the video what your favourite sportive is. I've done the Dirty Reaver twice. Really difficult, but what a beautiful day out. Again, weather's another thing to check. There's nothing you can do about that close to the day. If you're doing your own cycle, you can cancel it or postpone it. Event leaders, unless it's cataclysmic, cannot cancel or move an event, so you have to keep it going. The Fred Whitten was a favourite of mine, but brutal. It covered every single pass of notoriety in the Lake District. So the Cutland Pass, the Honister Pass, the Whinlatter Pass, there's a couple I can't remember now, but then there's the famous Hardknot Pass, which came at 90 miles. So difficult to do the hardest pass in Britain with 90 miles in your legs, 35% gradient. That was never to be forgotten. I can't say it was the most enjoyable part of any sportive I've ever done, but certainly it was unforgettable, especially when, yeah, I had to get off and walk. It was so steep, I couldn't move my bike forward. Then you go over the other side, now having the Honister pass, now having the Whinlatter pass, and 100 miles in your legs, and Rhino's passes just over the other side, so fun times. You'll see on my videos I did a well-established sportive last weekend called the Straven Round 50. That's a great wee sportive, it's a great starter because it's only 50 miles. Not any real serious climbing in it. A couple of wee stiff climbs near Stonehouse. We've got great food stops, lots of people on it. So 50 miles with 2 food stops. If it's a beginner's event you're looking for, it's really great because it's got everything you'll need. And there's no rush, it's relaxed, and it's a nice wee town. My Sportive de Velo, we run a number of cycles on the day. So the main Sportive is 90 kilometres, beautiful scenery, climbing's not too bad. Although there is a couple of stiff wee climbs in it. But we also run what we call the cafe ride. So although we have food stops and a food stop in the big ride, people can choose not to bother. Whereas the cafe ride tends to be 20-25 miles with a planned cafe stop. So if that's what you think your ability is, we offer something for that. Plus we've got a wee mountain bike route as well. I've done various sportives down in the Borders in Dumfries and Galloway, especially on gravel. And sometimes doing a sportive on gravel is quite a good way to explore an area. Because if you go into the wilds of Dumfries and Galloway, you could get lost quite easily. But if you go there, knowing you've got a GPX route to follow on your computer, all lovely signs, perfect. You don't need to carry tons and tons of stuff to eat because there'll be good food stops, and you don't have to worry about the fact there's no shops in the wild that you can stop at. So that's another one that I've enjoyed. I think it was called the Beastie by Glorious Gravel. I had a 200 kilometre version, and again, one of the good things about the sportives is, I would say you don't often go along to them and find that you can move up and say, oh, I'm feeling much better, so I'm going to do the 100 mile instead of the 50. But usually the smaller routes start with the bigger routes. So if you want to start on a big route and you find you've not got the legs that day, take the smaller route. I've done that once or twice. And sometimes, no matter what your training is, you could have had a cold, you could have had the flu, you could be recovering, you could have done a big effort the week before. But essentially, you can take the smaller option. It's not really a problem. Tour of the Borders, which I think is coming up. It's a really good sportive. Starts and finishes in Peebles. Another closed road sportive, which is quite good, because then you don't have to worry about cars being there. I was on the famous Tour of the Borders route that had cataclysmic rain, and I was meant to do the big route that day. Nobody did the big route that day because some of the road got washed away, and in fact some of the cyclists who were up ahead had to be rescued from a flood from a tractor. That's not going to happen that much. It was a freak event. But one thing I would warn you about closed road sportives, they tend to be ridiculously early in the morning, because often the caveat for the organisers being either able to get or pay for the closed roads is that you'll get those closed roads from 5 AM in the morning. Now the Attack Loch Ness, I did that last year, and my start time was 5:15 in the morning. That is not pleasant. It's nice to get the closed roads, but just be aware of that. And one of the problems with that I found is, in April, at 5:15 in the morning in Inverness, it's freezing. So you are dressed for a winter's day, but by 7, 8 o'clock it's het up a bit, you've het up a bit, and so you spend 60, 70 kilometres with your pockets actually rammed full of arm warmers and gilets and stuff like that. So that's a downside. The other downside is it's just so early in the morning. And if you're planning to drive home after the event, just be aware of that, because you maybe have been up since 3:30 or 4 in the morning to get yourself prepared for the ride. And so if you've got a big drive to do home, really think whether you maybe better booking something for a hotel or wherever you're staying for another night, or going back to your accommodation or your car and having a good snooze before you drive. Near Taplock Ness again last year, I was driving down the A9 and I could feel myself getting tired, and that's not a safe situation. So I pulled over into the lay-by and had a snooze. So that's another thing to think about the early starts. My sportive begins at 10 o'clock, a nice sociable 10 o'clock on a Saturday. And I think that's another thing you need to think about, what day of the week it is. Now, my preference for any event is a Saturday. I like to do my working week, get ready on the Friday night, event the Saturday, then I've got Sunday to rest and recuperate. A lot of events are on a Sunday, which kind of means if you've got work on the Monday, it's not so great. So check the dates first. It's not always suiting you. Some people have Saturday shifts as well if things on a Saturday, and vice versa. So think about that too. There is a lot to think about in the sportive. Now, I hope you've enjoyed my wee YouTube live video tonight, where we talked about what is a sportive and choosing the right sportive. Next time I'm on, I hope to talk about choosing your bike for a sportive and maybe how to properly fuel and hydrate the sportive. So, you've kept me company for most of my turbo ride this evening. If anybody's got any questions that they want to ask about sportives, leave them in the comments. If you're late to this video, if you're live, you can type them right now. But if you're new to sportives especially, and you're not sure about anything, just ask a question. Having done them now for a long time, and there's things I don't like about them, there's things I like about them. We have their ups and their downs, the pros and the cons. But anything you want to ask, write a comment, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I have 2.5 kilometres to go on my wee turbo training session as a leg spinner tonight, because I have a race on Sunday. I am in the 45 to 49 year olds category for the British Gravel Champs. So don't want to tire the legs, but want to keep the legs working. Anyway, I'm going to sign out just now. Thanks for tuning in and listening if you did. And I'll see you next time. Oh, remember, 3 things you need to do: like, subscribe, and get out and ride. Cheers everybody.